Hello and welcome to Today in Film episode 30. I'm your host Dominic Parry, and with today is
Kevin Parry.
Now, today's episode we're going to be talking about the original Italian Job, released in 1969. What do you think of this film?
I think it's an excellent film. So it ticks all the boxes for me. I'm a car enthusiast. I like classic British things. I think it's a great film that's got a fun aspect to it. Lots of good actors. It takes you back to a different place and a different time. Really, what did you think?
Well, this is the first time I've watched it in a good few years, and I have to say that it's not a film you'd watch for any kind of major plot or script. It's a very enjoyable movie and experience, but it is very simple.
Yeah, very light-hearted. So I've probably watched it 10 times, I guess, over the years. Saw it when I was quite young originally. And it's one of those sort of films for a car enthusiast. There's always something different that you notice every time you see it. So if you're into the minis, obviously there's a bit of an interest there. Um, the works of the actors that are taking part, of course. So you've got some class British actors taking part, and then all the sort of classic cars that you can see in the background in the shots as well, make it quite interesting.
Yeah. So this is it's a very easygoing film. Like, if anything, it is a kind of very basic heist movie without the steps that modern heist movies have, where it's kind of like assembling the team and all that stuff. Because although it has that, it's not kind of in depth. It just happens, and it's just like, here's the team.
Yeah.
So, like, modern movies, they kind of have the big, right, we're going to do this, and it's like, this is this guy, this is this guy. The only person that already had that was Professor Plum. So it's
there was a bit of a build up to him being drafted into the team, wasn't there?
yeah,
The team were introduced, of course. So there are a few scenes where you sort of met the drivers, but on a very superficial sort of level, really. And you did understand who was going to be doing what as it went along. Really, I thought Michael Caine was very well cast in the main part. I think his accent and his acting sort of helped the film along. Apparently, they wanted Robert Redford for the lead part, but eventually it went to Michael Caine, which suited the essentially British sort of aspect of the film very well, I thought.
Well, it seems, looking at some of the kind of things that happened back when it was being made or before it got made, there were multiple people around it trying to get it to be something different. So, kind of, obviously, Paramount, I think it was, wanted Robert Redford, which obviously, is American, not the best kind of British thing. Then you had Fiat, who wanted the Fiat 500 instead of the Mini. So it's kind of this film that was supposed to be kind of British had just people kind of trying to come in at multiple stages to go, well, what if we do this instead?
Yeah, I think the Fiat 500 in the main part would have changed the film completely. So apparently Fiat offered the 500 car that was a popular seller for them at the time. This was 1969. They offered those cars free of charge
and 50 grand on top.
Yeah, so right, okay. And anyway, they stuck to their guns and they decided it should be the Mini Cooper. So they had to go out and buy 16 cars, I believe, were used in the filming, and they were the cars mainly in the main shots were Mini Cooper S models. I think they probably used in the crash scenes a couple of cars that had already been damaged anyway. So the Mini was brought out in 1959. It had been around for 10 years by then, with the Cooper S versions then being introduced in 1961. So the Minis were quite sort of big on the scene at the time, and I can't imagine the film would have been quite as successful if Fiat cars had been in the main part, really.
Well, it was successful in the UK because obviously it's a quintessentially British film with British characters in the lead, British cars, and it is it's a very kind of homely film, but if patriotic, yeah, really like the American marketing campaign for this film, the poster I showed you yesterday for it,
yeah,
which it doesn't at all describe the film. Some guy with a Tommy gun and a girl is not the film in any way.
Yeah. So the poster for that was it Michael Caine?
No, it was just some guy with a mafia outfit, Tommy gun in his hand,
with a Tommy gun, and then a naked girl sitting with her back to the camera
with some thing on her back,
with some patterning on her back, which was a little bit confusing, really. I think the ad campaign in Britain was far more direct and had lots of sort of red, white, and blue colour and all that sort of thing, tied very much better into the film.
Well, I think it is very British, and because of that, like some people have said, that's why it didn't do well in America. Obviously, the marketing campaign didn't help it too much, but these films like this, you don't really get many of them now.
No, well, it certainly stood the test of time, and it may not have been successful in America at the time, but I would suppose there's probably a bit of interest in America now, and in nations abroad, because it's just remained as an icon, really. And anybody who's interested in the mini scene, certainly they will have seen it, and I think it's been overdubbed in various languages.
Yeah.
Every year, somewhere in the world, there's a big international meeting called the International Mini Meeting, and the last time that was in Britain, the Italian Job was certainly screened there. Hundreds of people watching the film as it was being shown, and it certainly doesn't seem to have lost any of its popularity.
Well, I think it is probably one of, if not the most iconic British film there is.
It had pretty much everything, didn't it? Really, it had a little bit about the football sort of fans and the fact that there was a football game. I suppose that harked back to winning the World Cup in '66. There was all the sort of the Minis and the Aston Martins and the E-Type Jags. There was fantastic scenery. There was some absolutely excellent film work. Some of the aerial shots where it showed the bus sort of threading through the alpine roads, around the hairpin bends and all that sort of thing. The stunt scenes with the Minis, going through shopping arcades and going through the sewer pipes and across the weir on the roof of the Fiat building, all of those things really. And then I suppose the one sort of patriotic aspect of it was we were getting one over on the Italians by nicking the gold and sort of taking it from under their noses.
Well, I think one of the interesting things is that for a film that is essentially, it is a heist movie, but it is a car movie as well. There are a lot of cars that get destroyed in this film. So you get the Lamborghini at the start, then you get the 3 sports cars, the E-Types and the
Aston Martin.
It's just there's a level of destruction of cars that you don't really see in modern movies unless it's kind of just wanton destruction.
Well, they're actual cars which are being pushed off the mountain, aren't they, as well?
No, the ones they actually pushed off the mountain were all fakes.
Yeah, well, no, right. So they weren't complete cars.
Yeah.
They were damaged cars. I think some of them had their engines taken out and that sort of thing. But they were actual cars which were being pushed off the mountain. It wasn't any CGI or it wasn't made up. So I doubt that a filmmaker would have that right to would be able to do that these days with health and safety concerns and environmental issues and that sort of thing. But yeah, the opening scene for me just sets the tone of the whole film, really. So you've got the Italian character driving a Lamborghini Miura, red car through the Alpine roads with sort of snow in the background, and he's driving along with Matt Monro singing On Days Like These. Matt Monro was a very popular artist at the time, British guy. So singing a song which includes Italian lyrics as well. And everything is fine, isn't it? Really lovely blue sky with sunshine in the background, and then he enters a tunnel and meets his end. So from there it sort of it carries on. But an iconic start to the film, without a doubt.
Yeah, I think one of the things, like, the script would be interesting to look at for the start mainly, because
there is actually a Squire magazine. I'm not sure exactly when the date was. I think it was back in the 80s, but they did a retrospective on the Italian Job, and in the Squire magazine, you can find that magazine, which has got the entire script in it. So I think that's a bit of a rarity and a bit of a collector's item now, but that's certainly out there and it's been done. I've not looked, but it wouldn't surprise me if the entire script was on the internet somewhere as well.
Yeah, it probably is. But that start bit, it's like it's a perfect way to do the classic kind of opening credits. So it's a very easy scene to watch. There's nothing happening like that you're kind of drawn to. He's just driving.
Yeah.
And it's a very calm kind of start, and then obviously the movie starts and he crashes. It's kind of,
but you don't get opening credits so much in films these days, do you?
You don't, unless people want to be stylistic and kind of, this is my opening and this is how I want to start it, and kind of these are the key players and stuff like that. It's a very old thing that for some movies it does work nowadays, but I think for a lot of films it isn't the kind of best thing, because obviously it does pull the kind of immersion already.
Yeah, and it doesn't. So you're watching this car being driven up through the Alps, and the credits are rolling. The graphics are not sort of intrusive, so you're not you're watching this while reading that, and the two go quite well together, don't they? And then they show the credits again at the end of the film.
Yeah, so but the credits are extremely short at the end.
Yeah.
So it's it's literally kind of, I think it's less than a minute and they're done.
Well, that for me, you see in modern films, sometimes the credits can run on and on and on. I mean, for example, the stunt drivers had a major part to play in this film, but they were credited as just one company. Handled the stunts. No individual driver was credited.
I think realistically, the way they did that was kind of the way you see on modern films and stuff, when they might have the catering and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The catering's done by Food Co. or something, and it's one group. They don't say he is the head chef, because there could be another 100 people involved.
Yeah, but it goes on and on, doesn't it? In times, in modern films, it seems to just run on and on.
Yeah, but I think the Italian Job is a very kind of, I'm not quite sure how much the budget was, but they did some stuff like the traffic jam was in part caused by the mafia, and then in part caused by the crew who were blocking off roads and stuff.
Right.
So obviously, you wouldn't get away with doing that now, because you'd probably be having a big load of fines, wouldn't you? So it's that kind of way of bootleg filmmaking, essentially, like, cutting corners to get to do like certain things. If you tried to do that now, it wouldn't go well.
No, and for the car enthusiast watching it, that traffic jam scene, there's just sort of wall to wall Fiat 500s, and there's Lancias and Alfa Romeos, and it's just a delight really to pick out the different cars that you can see in that shot alone.
I think that's the interesting thing, because obviously, if majority of those cars are real cars, they're real people, who just got caught up in this thing, then there's no there's no manipulation from the crew of being like,
And
we're
there's
going to
no
stick some lanciers and some
there's no
fitters here.
staging of it. No,
Yeah.
it's a very natural sort of scene, isn't it? Really. So just looking at it, I picked out some unusual cars in the background. So I was sort of watching that when we watched the film recently. So there's even things like mini mokes, and they drive a Fiat Dino. So one of the mafia guys has got a Fiat Dino, which has got a rare car now. There's a Lancia Flaminia. There's all sorts of different things, unusual cars like Triumph Heralds, which you wouldn't really think would be big in Italy at the time, and Morris and Oxford, Austin Cambridges, and that sort of thing. Um, all sorts of cars being used in the background, with the central car being the Mini, I would say.
Well, I think the interesting thing is that the vehicles that the team have aren't just minis. They have the sports cars, which obviously get destroyed, but they have also got the coach. They've also got the minibus kind of thing, and then they've got a Land Rover. So it's
fully spec Land Rover, but cars throughout the film actually. So it starts with obviously the Miura, and then shortly after that, when Michael Caine's character is coming out of prison, his girlfriend comes to pick him up, and she's stolen the Pakistani ambassador's car. And apparently, that really was the Pakistani ambassador's car that they were using. Charlie Croker then goes to pick up his Aston Martin from safe storage. So again, there's a big focus on the Aston Martin car, and he leans under the bonnet to get his wallet of money from under there.
Apparently, that entire exchange was kind of improvised by the two of them.
Right.
So I think the whole, because also that has the line about hunting tigers with a machine gun.
Yeah.
Which is it's a very kind of witty comment that, for a scriptwriter, that kind of witty comment is a very hard thing to get.
Yeah.
So I can see how it's kind of improvised, and that joke just comes across naturally.
Yeah, and then he drives down the sort of exit ramp from the garages into a very sort of late '60s London scene with all the sort of high-rise buildings, and the car just looks superb, because it's a really nice Aston Martin, swoopy curves.
Yeah.
It's a convertible as well, and he comes down, and there's an Alfa Romeo GTV parked in the background.
I think
and off he goes with a roar of exhausts.
Yeah.
And
I think the interesting thing about that kind of scene is that that's the only time that he's seen to be driving, essentially.
And it wasn't him.
Well, no. The thing is that because Michael Caine couldn't drive at the time, and when you see the car pull up to the hotel, you don't actually see the guy's face. It's kind of very dark and covered. So then, obviously it cuts then to him getting out of the car, and you can kind of assume, well, it wasn't him on the car at all, was it?
Yeah, yeah.
Which, for a film about cars, having the main character not drive is, well, quite weird, isn't it?
Something they've got to get around, I guess. I didn't realise he wasn't a driver at the time. That's interesting. Anyway, she then goes on to stage a sort of a coming out party for him, coming out of prison, that is, and gets a load of dolly birds there to sort of entertain him. And then shortly after, he goes to a room in the hotel to see the video, which has been prepared by the guy who loses his life in the Miura, about the heist they're going to carry out to get the gold, which apparently is a settlement for a Chinese factory being set up by Fiat.
Well, I think the interesting thing about this is that the kind of exposition, so the explanation of the heist and all that stuff, it is extremely overt, and it's something that a lot of filmmakers nowadays would try and go away from, because it goes on for a good few minutes, and it's just the guy talking and talking about the heist.
This is where they're in the meeting room in the hotel.
When he's
They're all
watching,
sat
when
around the
he's no,
table.
when
Oh,
they're
right,
watching
no.
the video,
Yeah, yeah,
and he's kind of going for it, and he's like this device we use and all this, and just, it kind of keeps going. And obviously, in a modern movie, you would try and do that in like a really interesting way, and it's kind of different. But here it is just, it makes sense because Charlie Croker is just some guy,
yeah.
you know, he's an ex-con who's just come out of prison, so he's not really wired into it. So him having a video makes sense.
He's a kind of small time crook, isn't he? But obviously, he's at that stage in his life as a criminal, I suppose, where he's fearless, and you know, he's the sort of man who could take this on because he believes that much in himself. Anyway, and then we're introduced to Noel Coward's character, Mr. Bridger, and he brings, I think, you know, Noel Coward, having been one of the finest classical actors, brings some gravitas to the whole film, and it was his last film, I believe.
Yeah. Well, he was ill during it, so it's. If I'm pretty sure, the assistant character that was in the film is is either related to him or it's a friend of his. It was kind of, they were cast essentially to help him out.
Yeah,
which he does say a few lines, I think.
yeah, but Noel Coward's lines are kept pretty short, aren't they?
Yeah.
So he doesn't say a great deal to camera, and the way it's shot as well. You know, there are certain shots where you certainly see that he's not in good health, I think, and I believe the shot where he's walking down through the prison had to be shot in about 3 different takes or so.
No, I don't think it was takes. I think it was they shot it in kind of chronology, but he kind of, you know, stopped and then they started again.
Oh, right.
So obviously they just edited it together so it looks like one continuous walk.
Right.
Which, it's, you know, it's very well done because you could watch this film and just not pick up on the fact that he's ill, because he is still very good in the role.
Yeah.
Um,
So it really was. It was a case where some actors were cutting their teeth. Some actors were having their first break with the film,
well,
and others, like Noel Coward, it was his last film.
I think the interesting thing is that, like I was saying earlier about the kind of getting the gang together, when they have the meeting room introduction, the whole gang that's there, he introduces the drivers very, very basically.
Yeah.
He introduces the other people, and then he just goes and hears the people doing the thing. That, like, in modern movies, they would have to have some amazingly interesting thing about each person, whereas this is just a bunch of criminals.
Yeah.
So you don't really need to know, like, this person does this person does this.
But as you move on then into the actual sort of the meat of the film, as it were, it's the car that becomes the star, isn't it? So
Yeah.
the driver is sort of, you know, they're used in little bit scenes and things. You know, there's a couple of scenes where they're trying to get the cars on the ramp to go into the back of the bus. You know, after the robbery. But apart from that, it's all about the cars. It's all about the Mini Coopers basically winning out over the other vehicles that are trying to chase them, isn't it? So it's, you know, they're sliding around corners, you know, steadfastly sort of spinning the wheels and off they go. Whereas the Motor Guzzi bikes are sort of sliding and crashing, and you know the Alfa Romeo police cars are being washed away downstream and crashing into the sort of the bars at the end.
One of the interesting things is that I think, well, one of the reasons I think this is so kind of popular still and why it's stood the test of time is that, as you know, it's a very good car movie. The stunts are very well done. It looks great, but the other thing is that, you know, it has good acting and good comedy in it.
Yeah.
So there's no jokes, I don't think, in this that really come across like oh, that's a joke, obviously, and it just doesn't land. So like Professor Plum or Peach, whatever it is.
Professor Peach brings some real comedy into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they start off by they describe in one of their early meetings that they're going to need a techie expert to deal with all the sort of computer side of it. And the only guy that they can think who might meet that sort of criteria is Professor Peach. The only problem is he's been put away because he's been up to no good. And there's a scene with Irene Handel, who was absolutely excellent in that part. Anyway, they managed to go and get him out of the home that he's now living in. He's got a bit of a thing for large women, and they get him out anyway, and he's the man to deal with all the sort of tricky electronics bits and computer programming and all that sort of
And
thing.
he was played by Benny Hill, wasn't it?
Benny Hill was the character, yeah, and he fitted that perfectly. A few misdemeanors along the way where he's pushing a lady into the bus by fondling her buttocks.
Well, I find it quite funny that obviously after that scene, for some reason you see him getting arrested, and then he pushes her into and they're trying to get her through the door into the police station, but then that never comes back.
No,
which is obviously, you can just assume that at the end of the film they've just left him there.
Yeah.
So
he's not in any of the later scenes.
No, he's not.
He's not in the bus at the end.
Which is one of the weirdest things because, usually you'd have some wrapping up of it, but instead they just kind of ignore him and he just goes off into the police station apparently.
Yeah, well, his work is done, I suppose, but he's even helping a woman into the police station, doesn't he?
It's the same woman. Yeah.
So they're obviously taking him off to deal with it. It's one of those things which is goes unexplained, doesn't it? Really. One scene that I liked was Michael Caine's character turns up hiding in the toilet when Noel Coward's character comes in for his daily ablution, and Mr. Bridger is offended by this, because he thinks that he accuses Michael Caine rather. He is accused of trying to interrupt his daily ablutions, and following that, then Mr. Bridger walks into the office of the governor, sort of goes and takes a seat, and then begins complaining about this, about how the governor's not doing his job properly and all this sort of thing. The governor's played by Le Mesurier, who was one of the Dad's Army guys, and superb scene, I thought. Where Mr. Bridger's obviously got quite a lot of sway in the prison, and he goes and challenges the governor in that way.
Well, I think it's there's the line of you're meant to keep people out as well as in.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's kind of this. It's a weird thing. It's the whole thing of the crime boss. The safest place for him to operate from is the prison, because obviously they can't chuck him in prison more, can they?
Yeah, like he says, if the prison's doing its job properly, then people should be kept out as well as in.
Well, it's you get a sense that he obviously does run the prison. Obviously not legally, but he's in charge around there. When he has when he watches the video of the heist and all that stuff, and he kind of says to one guy like, "How's your house?" And then the guy kind of walks out cowardly, and it's like,
"You're very welcome," or something like that. Yeah. And then, of course, he says we better have a funeral because they need to meet and they need to talk it through. And then there's a further meeting in his Harley Street dentist, isn't there, where he's got all the criminals together, sort of under locked doors, really, and they're thrashing out all the sort of the finer points of it. He says about Professor Peach. So one of the other characters says, "But what if he's not bent?" And Noel Coward's character says, "Everybody in the world is bent." And obviously they managed to pull the strings to get him on the team.
Yeah. Well, I think the interesting thing is they refer to him as the best like computer expert in, I think, either the world or Britain, which, at the time it's kind of that's quite a big thing to say. This is the top guy and they're going for him. And it doesn't take much persuasion from Telton, does it?
Not really. No. Well, he's got quirks, and they go over to see him in the home. Doesn't seem that he's being kept there against his will, actually. But and then there's a scene where Croker opens up the blind, and they've got two fat ladies sat on the back of the Aston Martin, and Professor Peach gets very excited about this, and wants to be part of the job. The drivers of the minis are introduced, so they're Chris, Tony, and Dominic.
Yeah.
And as he's going around the table introducing the different people in the team, it's quite an amusing sort of amusing scene, and he introduces Camp Freddy.
Well, I think the interesting thing is that Camp Freddy and Professor Peach are the only two characters that, apart from Charlie Croker, that really have any kind of quirk to them. So, like, those two characters are probably the closest to modern heist movie characters.
Yeah.
Where they have something unique. So obviously, Camp Freddy, when they're in their suits and stuff, he wears a bright pink suit, which I don't know where you'd get a bright pink suit from, but he somehow got one. And
well, it was 1960s London, so I wouldn't have thought it would be different.
Well,
really.
It's a weird thing. Is he's watching the Land Rover following the gold into the square, and he's wearing the full suit still, and then he kind of walks off with his overalls.
Yeah.
So I'm meant to assume that in the space of a couple minutes, he changes from a suit into overalls and heads probably half a mile down the road, and it's obviously very stylized. But if you actually look at it, it doesn't really make much sense of how you'd get from one point of that place all the way to the other side.
Yeah, and there's that scene in the piazza as well, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah, where he's up on the balcony, sort of watching, and he's got his helmet and overalls ready to take part, but it doesn't show what part he takes, does it?
No, it doesn't. He's just there. There's a few characters who are just there throughout the film, but it's going back to your kind of line about everyone's bent. It's if you had that in a film now, you might think it means like what everyone's gay, but obviously back then he's kind of he means bent as in crook.
Yeah, so there are certain bits of dialogue in it which suit that time, aren't they? Really, they're very much of the time that it was made back in the 60s. Got different connotations now.
Yeah,
and I think from what I've read, the word camp in this film was the first time that it had been used in a film to describe someone who was gay.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting dynamic, like between films nowadays and then. It's the quirk of this character is that he is gay. That's the whole quirk. But obviously, there are films that have that kind of quirk still as like a character trait, but it's kind of frowned upon now. But it works so well.
But I guess that's part of what makes the Italian Job what it is, isn't it? Really, they get away with those little bits. The bit that I like about it as well is, to my mind, a lot of the films, more modern films, have got too much violence and too much sort of, I guess, too much focus on that. And with a film like this, you realise there's going to be some, strong arm tactics at some point.
Well,
they don't show it. So
no, they do, because when they attack the van, they knock a few people on the head with batons.
Yeah, but it doesn't sort of, doesn't hang on those sort of moments, does it? Really?
No, but the
they
thing
smash the
is,
windows with baseball bats.
yeah,
But the one scene particularly, which they could have gone a little bit more into, and probably would have in a modern film, is where Croker, so Mr. Bridger, because he's invaded his toilet, orders that he should be given a going over, and the heavies turn up at his girlfriend's flat, and they chase him around a bit, and then they go into a room where you can see a bit of sort of rough and tumble going on,
yeah,
and they're hitting him with a kosh or whatever, but they don't sort of dwell on that.
no.
So he's getting a bit of a working over, and that's it.
Well, the thing is that in a lot of modern movies, when they do the attack on the van and they hit the people with the batons,
Yeah,
it wouldn't be out of place in a modern movie if they got out the thing and just shot the people.
yeah,
Which, obviously, the crime that they're committing is the robbery.
yeah.
They're not there to go around killing other people or
No.
seriously harming
It's
others.
fairly sort of it's well done, isn't it? And it's fairly innocent, really. I mean, they're squirting some blue dye on the windows of the van, bop a few people with with a cricket bat or whatever, and off they go. And it's all so that they can facilitate the robbery that's going to take place, isn't it? And then they just get the van, which has got all the gold in through a pair of large gates into a sort of a building behind, and then very simply just take the gold out the back, put it in the back of the minis, and off they go.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things which are like little technical inaccuracies. So at one point, when they're preparing all the minis, and Michael Caine's character comes in and he's sort of shouting orders to various people. The one thing he says about quartz iodine lamps are those quartz iodine, which were those lamps were sort of fairly new on the market. So Sibi, French manufacturer, brought those in, and they were very much the buzz thing at the time. Very bright compared to other lamps that were available. And then there's one scene where the Mini is jacked up, and the back is jacked up in the air. And one of the guys explains that he's got a problem with the differential. So anybody who knows anything about minis will realise that the differential is part of the transmission, which in a mini is firmly in the front of the car. You certainly don't need to jack up the back to do anything with the differential. And if you were, you'd have to take the engine and gearbox out anyway. So little bits like that I'm sure all the sort of the mini buffs would have picked up on. So the cars used are Mini Mark 1 Cooper S variants. So these are the most desirable cars that the Mini enthusiasts are now looking to get. It's a bit of a cringe sort of when you see the Minis being chucked off the side, particularly the ones where it looks like they're coming out the back of the bus and going down, being smashed to smithereens going down the hill.
Well, they're obviously not like working cars, because I think the final one, it falls a bit of distance, and it explodes into a ball of flames and black smoke.
Yeah,
which it's obviously they've stuck some demolition charges or something inside it.
Yeah,
set those off once it hit the thing.
And there's a scene where they're working out the whole thing. They're testing the cars and what have you at what looks like a racing circuit. I'm not sure exactly if it is, but they come flying along and sort of partly go up a ramp and then end up crashing the car. And there's one where the car goes up the ramp through the bricks and then comes to grief on the other side and then slides and crashes into another car, which, if you look at it, doesn't even look like a complete car.
No.
So some of them, I believe, were wrecks that they got from scrapyards, and and the one that was chucked down the mountain, I think they took the engine out, and it was not a complete car. I think possibly the Jaguar was the Jaguar E-Type that they showed being crushed. So the one that's famously got the number plate CRY, Cry.
Yeah.
I think that was a damaged car also.
I think all of them were. So it's obviously a lot more cost effective if they can get some kind of defective cars,
Yeah,
then obviously going to Jaguar or someone saying,
yeah,
can we have some new E-types because we want to lob them off a mountain?
yeah. Well, apparently they bought 16 Mini Coopers, Cooper S's, and every one of those was destroyed in the making of the
Yeah,
film. So there's been a lot of myths ever since. What happened to the original cars, and red, white, and blue Cooper S cars are around. There are some that go out and do shows and things like that, and there's reputed to be a guy who bought some of the parts off some of the cars at auction, and then he's recreated 3 cars based on some of those parts. So
yeah.
I don't know how many of those parts or how authentic they are or whatever.
Well, I
But
think
in what I read on the internet, he also had Michael Caine help him to recreate the cars, which I can't see quite what Michael Caine would be able to do
no,
with
'cause-
cars. I don't know. But certainly it was a good choice of car. I thought the Mini Cooper S just looked superb in every one of the shots, really. And they were high spec cars, so they had Minolite wheels, which were very desirable and quite expensive at the time. Cibi lamps on the front. They had roll bars inside. Um, they suited the film perfectly. And
yeah,
of course, the Mini was a very iconic car, very popular even then. So it sort of symbolised 60s Britain, um, and it was a classless car. So everybody from the district nurse or maybe a mum taking her kiddies to school might be driving a Mini, and then you had famous people like Peter Sellers and the Beatles, and some of the film
yeah,
stars at the time, Twiggy and people like that, who were sort of synonymous with the cool Britannia sort of vibe that was going on. London was a very, very popular sort of central city in style at that time, and the Mini fitted that perfectly.
yeah. I think my final point I'm gonna make is the in modern heist movies, the cars they use would be the fancy cars, the
Yeah,
sports cars, and this movie has them, and they get destroyed.
yeah,
So that's the obstacle they have to get past. It's you have the fast cars as backup, but then they get destroyed, and
mm.
it's a very the heist does go off without a hitch really. Like they get out, they get kind of on the way out, and they're on the road, and it's kind of well they've won,
Yeah,
and then obviously the back of the bus swings off the mountain, which was done because they couldn't show a film, the censors, where criminals were seen to kind of win.
yeah. See, everybody thinks that I get. Well, I've certainly heard that there's a theory that they had that ending of the film so that they could possibly do a sequel.
Well, that's not actually a theory. That's a true thing.
Okay.
So the idea was that the mafia was going to turn up. They would get they'd nick the gold, and then the movie would become the sequel would be the Brazilian Job, I think it was called, and it would be kind of Charlie and the crew going after the gold,
Ah, right. Yeah. Yeah.
which obviously didn't happen. But I think interestingly, this is an adaptation, so it's based on a book. But the ending of the book is extremely different
Yeah.
because they make it back to England, and then Mr. Bridges says, "We'll take it back."
Does he?
Yeah,
Right.
which
Okay.
for the film, I don't think it would have worked at all.
No. You mentioned the modern films with cars which tend these days to be placed. BMW will pay a handsome fee for James Bond to drive one of their cars, or Aston Martin,
Yeah,
or whichever company it might be. And the thing which comes across in the Italian Job is far more authentic. They've bought the cars, and they're there solely to sort of to do the film, aren't they? And they show the cars along the way with damage on them. So
yeah,
when the car's coming up to try and go back into the back of the transporter at the end, there's mud all over it. There's dents in it. It's been driven through a sewage, sewage outlets and that sort of thing. Um, And for me, as a car enthusiast, when you watch some of those films, the Bond films and what have you, where those companies have placed and paid for that car as part of the advertising, really, the car's never really shown with damage, or it's never shown in a bad light. They're always polished and looking sort of
because
fantastic in the shots.
Apart from one or two of the James Bond films, I can't remember which one it is. It might be Casino Royale or Quantum of Solace. It has a big crash where it's got tons of rolls and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I think that's it's got like the award for the most like natural rolls in a car.
Yeah,
but like you don't see it because obviously it's a similar thing in games. So games like Forza, where it's car games,
yeah,
they the companies, so like Ferrari and stuff, they will have their car in the game, but the damage in the game is essentially useless. There's no kind of, you can't knock the bonnets off and you can't do all that because they don't want their cars to be destroyed.
Yeah. So they don't want them to be depicted or seen as damaged, and they avoid that. The one scene that really stands out is where they're driving the cars down through the sewage outlet.
Yeah.
And they're sort of they're going sort of up the walls, and those scenes, it's all sort of dark and gloomy, and you've got the lights sort of piercing through the dark. And what they were actually trying to do was to drive the car in a complete corkscrew to get it to do a full sort of 360 in the tunnel. And they smashed a few cars trying to do that. I think they could only do it sort of so far up the wall. They couldn't get the speed up enough.
What they did was, I think they tried it 3 or 4 times, and each time it ended up on the roof. So they kind of thought, well, we can't really waste any more cars on this.
No, well, you need to get up to a considerable speed, wouldn't you, to be able to pull that off?
Well,
I'm not sure if it's ever been done actually.
I think it has been done by somebody, but not in a Mini. I think it was because they to do it, you'd have to have realistically a dry surface.
Yeah,
it'd have to be a very long tunnel. It'd be kind of the conditions would have to be perfect.
Yeah.
And obviously in this, they're driving a sewer, so it's going to be, there's going to be stuff growing in there. There's going to be water and stuff.
It looked superb as a scene, though, didn't it? Really. And then they come out the other end of this sewage outlet, and then 2 of the guys just drop the barrier down, and the next car down, the Alfa Romeo police car, crashes into the barrier, and they're away basically. There's also a scene where, the car scenes we could talk about for another hour or two, couldn't we? But the scene where they're up on the roof of the Fiat factory, so Fiat home base really was Turin. That's what the name means. So it's FIAT, Turin being the T, and when their factory was designed, it had a test track built on the roof. And that's where the scene where the cars are flying around, and then they do a leap from one rooftop across to the other, which is incredible, isn't it?
That's the stunts in this film. They're nothing compared to some stunts they do in films today, but they feel a lot more authentic.
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't look like the stuntmen who did that jump, all the crew and stuff, and the people working at the factory thought it was going to end in a fatality.
Yeah.
Whereas, that kind of thing nowadays, if you have somebody doing a stunt like that, they would have wires, they'd have padding everywhere. It'd be kind of, if they do mess this up, they're probably going to be all right anyway.
Yeah.
So it feels like they're actually risking something. It
feels more authentic, yeah. And the scenes in the cars, really, I think the stunts that they show of the cars, they do feel authentic, and they're for real. And that's what part of the appeal of the film is, I think.
So, what would you give this out of 10 then?
I'd like to say 10 out of 10, but I'd say perhaps 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10.
Why not 10 then?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know. I would like to have I'd like the film to have been concluded at the end,
Yeah,
because that's, I mean, it leaves it to the hanging quite literally, doesn't it? So there's that, and um, I think that's it. That's it, really.
yeah. Well, I think I have to give it an 8
And your
because,
eight would be because,
well, it's. I think it's because of the simplicity of it. So there are things that could have had more in there, you know. So I think that had we seen a bit more of certain things, it would have just, a bit more length. I think is what would be kind of needed to get it up to the higher
yeah,
numbers. But
yeah.
obviously 8's still not low.
No, so an 8 and a 9. That's pretty good going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'll do it for this episode. Go subscribe, and see you next week.